My parents laughed and said my sister will only be staying at my house for a while. I stood up and said, "How funny. I haven't lived here in 6 weeks." My mother's voice shaken, "Wait. So, where exactly have you been staying?" The silence that followed my words was so thick you could have cut it with a butter knife. I watched as the color drained from my mother's face, her coffee mug trembling in her hands. My father's newspaper crumpled slightly as his grip tightened, and my sister Jessica looked between us all with growing confusion. "What do you mean you haven't lived here in 6 weeks?" Mom's voice was barely above a whisper. I couldn't help but smile, though it wasn't a pleasant one. 6 weeks of careful planning, 6 weeks of watching them live in their bubble of ignorance, and finally, the moment of truth had arrived. "Exactly what I said, Mom. I moved out 6 weeks ago. You just never noticed." The story really begins 3 months ago, when my golden child sister Jessica announced she was getting divorced from her husband Mark after only 8 months of marriage. The reason? She'd been having an affair with her personal trainer, Derek, and Mark had finally discovered the truth. But of course, in typical Jessica fashion, she managed to spin it as Mark being emotionally unavailable and not supportive of her fitness journey. Our parents, David and Linda Thompson, ate it up like gospel. "Poor Jessica," they said. "She deserved so much better. She needed their support during this difficult time. Never mind that she destroyed her marriage through infidelity, or that Mark had been nothing but loving and generous to her throughout their relationship. I'm Sarah, by the way. The older daughter, the responsible one, the one who'd been living in the family home at 26 to help with the mortgage payments after Dad's construction business took a hit during the pandemic. I'd been paying $1,500 a month in rent to my own parents, plus helping with groceries and utilities. It was supposed to be temporary, just until I saved enough for a down payment on my own place. But when Jessica's marriage imploded, suddenly my temporary arrangement became a problem. "Sarah, honey," Mom had said that fateful day 3 months ago, "Jessica is going through such a hard time. She needs to come home for a while to get back on her feet." "Okay," I'd replied, looking up from my laptop where I was working on my graphic design projects. "The guest room is available." Mom shifted uncomfortably. "Well, actually, Jessica has so much stuff, and you know how small that guest room is. Plus, she'll need the privacy to heal from this trauma." My stomach dropped. "Are you asking me to give up my room?" "It's just temporary, sweetheart. Maybe you could take the guest room for a few weeks?" A few weeks turned into a month, and then 2 months. Jessica moved into my room, my sanctuary, and transformed it into her personal disaster zone. She threw out my houseplants, claiming they triggered her allergies. She rearranged all my furniture and complained that my queen bed wasn't comfortable enough for her sensitive back. She even had the audacity to suggest I should store my art supplies in the garage because they were cluttering up the space. Meanwhile, I was cramped in the 8x10 guest room with a twin bed and no desk space for my work. When I tried to use the dining room table for my projects, Jessica would come down and need the space for her vision boards and healing crystals. The breaking point came when I overheard Jessica on the phone with her friend Madison, laughing about how she'd managed to kick Sarah out of her own room and how our parents were totally wrapped around her finger. She went on to mock my work as a freelance graphic designer, calling it not a real job and suggesting that maybe this situation would motivate me to finally move out and stop being such a burden. That night, I made a decision that would change everything. I started looking for apartments immediately, but I didn't tell my family. Instead, I began documenting everything. Every mess Jessica left in the kitchen that I cleaned up. Every time she used my shampoo, ate my food, or left her clothes in the shared bathroom. Every conversation where our parents praised her strength and resilience while treating me like an inconvenience. I also started recording some of our interactions, particularly the ones where Jessica was at her nastiest. Pennsylvania is a one-party consent state, so I wasn't breaking any laws. I wanted evidence of who she really was behind the victim act she put on for our parents. 2 weeks later, I found the perfect apartment. It was a beautiful one-bedroom in a converted historic building downtown, with hardwood floors, huge windows, and enough space for a proper art studio. The rent was $2,000, $500 more than what I'd been paying my parents, but I'd been freelancing more and had just landed a major contract with a local marketing firm that would more than cover the difference. I put down the deposit and signed the lease that same day. But here's where my plan really began. Instead of announcing my move, I decided to see how long it would take my family to notice I was gone. I moved out gradually over the course of a week, taking boxes to my new place during the day while everyone was at work. I left just enough clothes and toiletries to make it look like I was still living there. I also left my houseplants in the main room where Jessica hadn't bothered to throw them out yet, and kept some art supplies in the garage to maintain the illusion. My important documents, electronics, and most of my belongings went to the new apartment first. The beauty of the guest room was that nobody ever went in there anyway. It was tucked away at the end of the hall, and since Jessica had taken over the main floor common areas, there was no reason for anyone to venture into my space. I kept up the illusion by doing 3 key things. First, I continued to make my bed every morning before work, so if anyone did peek in, it would look like I'd slept there. Second, I left a few dirty dishes in the sink periodically and made sure to replace the milk and other staples I supposedly would have used. Third, I maintained my usual communication patterns, responding to family group texts and showing up for Sunday dinners. Most importantly, I continued making my monthly rent payments through automatic bank transfer, so they wouldn't notice any missing income that might raise questions. The ironic part was that it was actually easier to maintain the illusion than it had been to live there. Without Jessica's constant mess and drama, without having to navigate the tension and favoritism, I could just pop in for appearances and leave. I was sleeping better, working more productively, and feeling happier than I had in months. My new apartment became my sanctuary. I had it set up with a separate entrance through the building's parking garage, which made it easy to come and go without neighbors noticing my unusual schedule. I set up my art studio in the second bedroom and started taking on bigger, more lucrative projects. During the day, I worked from home, taking client calls and video meetings from my apartment while maintaining the fiction that I was still living with my parents. I joined a local artists collective and began showing my work in galleries. I started dating again, something I'd put on hold while dealing with the chaos at home. After 2 weeks of settling in, I even adopted Luna, a beautiful calico from the local shelter, something I never could have done while living with Jessica, who claimed to be allergic to everything. Week by week, I watched my family through social media and our brief interactions. Jessica continued to milk her victim status, posting dramatic quotes about rising from the ashes and finding strength in adversity. Our parents continued to coddle her, paying for her gym membership, her therapy sessions, and her frequent shopping trips for self-care. The psychological toll of maintaining this double life was more complex than I'd anticipated. On one hand, I felt liberated and empowered, finally living on my own terms without walking on eggshells around Jessica's moods or our parents' favoritism. On the other hand, there was a deep sadness in realizing how easily I could disappear from their lives without anyone noticing. I started keeping a detailed journal of each day's interactions, partly for evidence and partly for my own sanity. Day 12, came by to grab mail. Jessica using my old room as her personal closet, clothes everywhere. Mom asked if I could pick up groceries since I was already out. Paid for $78 worth of food that Jessica will eat while complaining about being broke. Day 18, Sunday dinner. Dad mentioned the mortgage payment being tight this month. Jessica immediately suggested they could cut back on unnecessary expenses. When Mom mentioned my rent contribution, Jessica said maybe they should look into adjusting it since I barely use any space anymore. They all laughed. I excused myself to the bathroom and cried for 10 minutes. The most revealing moments came during those Sunday dinners. I'd sit at the table, contributing to conversations, helping clear dishes, being physically present, but it was like I was invisible. Jessica would dominate every discussion with her latest drama or achievement. She'd gotten a part-time job at a boutique and our parents treated it like she'd won a Nobel Prize. Jessica's so responsible, Mom would gush. She's really turning her life around. Meanwhile, I'd just landed my biggest freelance contract ever, worth more than Jessica would make in 6 months, and when I mentioned it, Dad nodded absently and asked Jessica if she needed help with her car insurance payment. The invisibility extended to the physical space too. During week 3, I conducted a little experiment. I rearranged the guest room completely, moving furniture around and changing the bedding. I left it that way for 5 days. Nobody noticed. I could have painted the walls neon green and hung disco balls from the ceiling, and as long as I showed up for Sunday dinner acting normal, they would have remained oblivious. But the most painful realization came during week 4, when I overheard a conversation between my parents that I wasn't supposed to hear. I'd stopped by to grab some art supplies I'd forgotten, and they were in the kitchen discussing finances. "We really need to think about raising Sarah's rent," Dad was saying. "With Jessica's expenses and the house repairs coming up, we could use the extra income." "How much were you thinking?" Mom asked. "Maybe bump it up to $2,000? She's hardly ever here anyway, always working on those art projects. And it's not like she has any other options at her age." "That seems fair," Mom agreed. "She should be grateful she has somewhere affordable to live. Most people her age are paying way more for apartments." They were planning to raise my rent by $500 for a room I wasn't even living in, based on the assumption that I had no other choices and should be grateful for their generosity. The casual dismissal of my art projects as if they were a hobby rather than my actual career was the final insult. That's when I started recording conversations more systematically. I bought a small digital recorder and began documenting not just Jessica's manipulative behavior, but also my parents' casual disregard for my contributions and achievements. The evidence piled up quickly. Meanwhile, I documented everything. Screenshots of Jessica's social media posts showing her out partying with Derek while she was supposedly healing from trauma. Photos of the chaos she left in the kitchen. Recordings of her on the phone bragging about manipulating our parents and mocking me. My new life was flourishing in ways I hadn't expected. Without the constant stress of navigating family drama, my creativity exploded. I was producing my best work ever, bold pieces that reflected my growing sense of self-worth and independence. The marketing firm I was contracting with offered me additional projects, impressed by both my artistic vision and my professionalism. I was making more money than I ever had, even after paying higher rent for my apartment. I also started building genuine friendships for the first time in years. Living at home had made it difficult to maintain adult relationships, especially when Jessica would monopolize any social gathering with her drama or make passive-aggressive comments about my friends. Now I had space to host dinner parties, art nights, and casual hangouts. My social life expanded beyond the suffocating bubble of family dysfunction. The artists' collective I joined became a second family of sorts, one that actually saw and valued me. They celebrated my successes, offered support during challenging projects, and treated my work with the respect it deserved. When I told them about my living situation experiment, they were fascinated and supportive, helping me process the emotional complexity of what I was discovering about my family dynamics. It's like you're conducting an anthropological study of your own family, my friend Maya observed during one of our coffee meetings. But the findings have to be pretty painful. She was right. Each day brought new evidence of how little I mattered to them as an individual, how easily they functioned without my actual presence as long as they believed I was still safely in my designated role as the responsible, invisible daughter. But the most damning evidence came in week 4 of my secret move. I'd stopped by to grab something I'd forgotten and overheard Jessica talking to Derek in my old room, which she was now calling her room. "I can't believe how easy this was," she was saying. "Sarah's such a pushover. And Mom and Dad are so desperate to help their precious baby girl that they don't even see how I'm playing them." Derek laughed. "What about Sarah though? Isn't she pissed about getting kicked out of her room?" "Please," Jessica scoffed. "She's too pathetic to stand up for herself. Besides, this house is way too nice for someone like her. She should be grateful I'm teaching her some independence." I recorded every word. As the weeks passed, I watched my family's dynamics with fascination. Nobody questioned my absence at family movie nights because I was probably tired from work. Nobody wondered why they never saw me in the kitchen making breakfast because I was always rushing out early. I had changed my mailing address to a P.O. box to avoid any mail delivery issues, and handled all my business correspondence through my apartment address. When I did show up for Sunday dinners, I parked a few blocks away and walked over, timing my arrivals for when everyone would already be gathered. They were so focused on Jessica's latest drama that I might as well have been invisible. It was during week 5 that I realized something that made my heart ache. My parents didn't actually miss me. They missed my rent money, my help with chores, my emotional labor, but they didn't miss me as a person. When I was there, I was just background noise. When I wasn't, they didn't notice the difference. That realization solidified my resolve for what I was about to do. I started planning the reveal carefully. I wanted maximum impact, maximum embarrassment, and maximum truth. I also wanted witnesses, so I decided to do it during Sunday dinner. Jessica often had Madison over for these dinners lately, treating them like social media opportunities to showcase her supportive family narrative. The setup was perfect. I arrived at Sunday dinner as usual, bringing dessert and acting completely normal. Jessica was holding court at the dining room table, regaling everyone with her latest tale of woe about how difficult it was to rebuild her life and how grateful she was to have such supportive family. Mom was making sympathetic noises and offering to pay for another shopping therapy session. Dad was nodding along and suggesting they could help with Jessica's car payment this month. Madison was taking photos for Jessica's Instagram, helping to craft the perfect blessed with family post. That's when Mom made the comment that gave me the perfect opening. "Well, the good news is that Jessica will only be staying here for a while longer," Mom said with a laugh. "Just until she gets fully back on her feet." Jessica laughed too. "Yeah, and then Sarah can have her precious guest room back and stop being so grumpy about the whole situation." The table erupted in chuckles, like I was the unreasonable one for being displaced from my own room. Like I was being childish for not embracing this temporary arrangement that had already lasted 2 months with no end in sight. That's when I stood up, smiled, and dropped my bomb. "How funny. I haven't lived here in 6 weeks." The laughter died instantly. You could have heard a pin drop in that dining room. I watched as confusion, then realization, then panic flashed across their faces. Mom was the first to speak, her voice shaking. "Wait. So, where exactly have you been staying?" I pulled out my phone and showed them photos of my apartment. My beautiful, organized, peaceful apartment with my art studio and my cat and my actual life. "I moved out 6 weeks ago," I said calmly. "I have a gorgeous 1-bedroom downtown. Luna and I are very happy there." "Luna?" Dad asked weakly. "My cat? The one I could never have here because Jessica is allergic to everything except drama and manipulation." Jessica's face was turning red. "You moved out? Without telling us? That's so selfish, Sarah. What if we needed you?" I laughed, actually laughed. "Needed me? For what, Jessica? You took over my room, you dismissed my work, you mocked me to your friends, and you celebrated kicking me out of my own space. What exactly did you need me for?" "That's not. I never." Jessica started to stammer. Oh, but you did. I pulled out my phone again and played the recording of her conversation with Derek. Her voice filled the dining room, clear as day, talking about how easy it was to manipulate our parents and how pathetic I was for not standing up for myself. The silence that followed was deafening. Madison looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Dad was staring at Jessica like he'd never seen her before. Mom's face was cycling through about 12 different emotions. Sarah, Mom finally said, why didn't you tell us you were moving out? Because I wanted to see how long it would take you to notice, I said simply. The answer is 6 weeks. 6 weeks of family dinners, group texts, and Sunday visits, and none of you realized I wasn't actually living here anymore. But your room? Dad started. You mean the guest room I was banished to? The one nobody ever goes into? Yeah, it's not that hard to make a bed look slept in when you're only maintaining appearances. I could see the wheels turning in their heads, reviewing the past 6 weeks, realizing how easily they'd been fooled, how little attention they'd been paying to my actual presence or absence. Jessica, meanwhile, was in full damage control mode. Sarah, you're blowing this way out of proportion. I was going through a divorce. I needed support. You were going through a divorce because you cheated on your husband, I said bluntly. And instead of facing the consequences of your actions, you manipulated our parents into making me the casualty of your poor choices. That's not fair, Jessica snapped. Mark was emotionally absent. He didn't understand my needs. I pulled out my phone again and showed them screenshots of Jessica's social media from the past 2 months. Pictures of her out partying, expensive purchases, spa days, and multiple photos with Derek, the personal trainer she'd been cheating with. This is what healing from trauma looks like? I asked, scrolling through the images. Because it looks a lot like a woman who destroyed her marriage and then convinced her parents to subsidize her party lifestyle. Madison finally spoke up, her voice small. Maybe I should go. No, stay, I said firmly. You're part of this too. You've been helping Jessica craft this victim narrative, encouraging her entitlement, and participating in mocking me behind my back. You should witness the consequences. I turned back to my parents, who were looking increasingly uncomfortable. Do you want to know what the really sad part is? I continued. I've been paying $1,500 a month to live here, plus groceries and utilities. Even after I moved out, I kept paying rent so you wouldn't get suspicious and ruin my experiment. I've been helping with housework during my visits, contributing to family expenses, and providing emotional support. But the moment your golden child needed something, I became disposable. Sarah, that's not true, Mom protested weakly. Isn't it? I challenged. When's the last time you asked about my work? My art? My life? When's the last time you celebrated one of my achievements or offered to help me with anything? I landed that Major Patterson creative contract 2 months ago that allowed me to quit my day job and focus on my art full-time. Did you know that? The guilty looks on their faces told me everything I needed to know. I didn't think so. But you know every detail of Jessica's self-created drama, don't you? You know about her gym membership, her therapy sessions, her shopping needs, her emotional state minute by minute. Jessica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I don't have to listen to this. You're just jealous because Mom and Dad love me more. The words hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Even Madison looked shocked that Jessica had said it out loud. There it is, I said quietly. The truth. Finally. Mom looked stricken. Jessica, that's not. We don't love anyone more. Don't you? I asked. Because your actions for the past 2 months have said otherwise. You've prioritized Jessica's comfort over my living situation. You've subsidized her lifestyle while I've been contributing to this household. You've coddled her through the consequences of her own poor choices while treating me like an inconvenience. I gathered my purse and stood up. But here's the thing. I don't need you to love me more. I don't need you to choose me over Jessica. I just needed you to see me, to value me, to treat me like I mattered. And you couldn't even manage that. Sarah, wait, Dad said, finally finding his voice. We can fix this. Jessica can move back to the guest room. Can she? I asked. Because Jessica just told you that you love her more. She just admitted that this whole thing was about establishing dominance over me. Are you really going to ask her to give up what she's claimed as hers? I looked at Jessica, whose face was a mask of fury and panic. Besides, it's too late. I don't want to live here anymore. I've seen who you all really are when you think I'm not watching. I've heard what you really think of me. I've witnessed the family dynamic when you believe I'm safely tucked away and not listening. I walked toward the door, then turned back one more time. Oh, and Mom? Dad? Since Jessica just publicly admitted that you love her more, and since you were planning to raise my rent to $2,000 anyway for a room I haven't slept in for 6 weeks, I assume this makes everything easier for everyone. You get Jessica's happiness, and I get my independence. The financial implication hit them like a slap. $1,500 a month gone. Plus my contributions to groceries and utilities. I could see Dad doing the mental math, realizing how much my absence was going to cost them. And Jessica, I said, looking directly at my sister, enjoy explaining to Derek why you're back to living with Mommy and Daddy. I'm sure that's really attractive to a man who's already proven he likes women who cheat. I left them sitting there in stunned silence and drove back to my beautiful, peaceful apartment where Luna was waiting for me with purrs and headbutts. The aftermath was swift and predictable. Within hours, I had texts from all of them. Mom alternated between guilt and anger, demanding to know why I deceived them and then pleading for me to come home so we can work this out. Dad focused on the practical, asking if we could discuss the financial arrangement and whether I'd consider helping out with expenses even if I didn't live there. Jessica's messages were pure venom, calling me manipulative, selfish, and cruel for ambushing her in front of Madison. I responded to none of them that night. Instead, I ordered Chinese food, opened a bottle of wine, and worked on a new painting while Luna supervised from her perch on my easel. The next few days brought more messages, phone calls, and even a visit from Mom, who showed up at my apartment after somehow getting my address from my emergency contact information at work. "Sarah, honey, we need to talk," she said when I opened the door. "Do we?" I asked, not inviting her in. "This has all gotten out of hand. Jessica is devastated. She's been crying for days." "Jessica is devastated that her manipulation tactics were exposed and recorded," I corrected. "She's devastated that she can't play victim anymore now that everyone knows the truth. She made a mistake, Sarah. She's young and going through a hard time. She's 24, Mom. I'm 26. Stop treating her like a child and me like I'm disposable." Mom's face crumpled. "We don't think you're disposable. We love you. You love the idea of me. You love having a responsible daughter who helps with expenses and doesn't cause drama. But you don't actually see me or value me as a person." "That's not true." I sighed and finally invited her in, mainly because my neighbors were starting to stare. "Mom, sit down. I want to ask you something, and I want you to answer honestly." She perched nervously on my couch, looking around at my apartment with surprise, as if she couldn't believe I was capable of creating such a beautiful, organized space. "What's my favorite color?" I asked. Blue? Green. What kind of art do I specialize in?" "Graphics. Design? Mixed media paintings and digital illustrations. What's the name of the marketing firm I'm contracting with?" I don't." "Patterson Creative. What's my middle name?" She stared at me, speechless. "It's Elizabeth, Mom. Elizabeth. After your mother. You chose it." The silence stretched between us as the reality of how little she actually knew about me sank in. "Now let me ask you about Jessica," I continued. "What's her favorite color?" "Pink," she answered immediately. "What's her favorite restaurant?" "That Italian place downtown, Marcello's." "What's the name of her gym?" "Fitness First on Maple Street." "What's her middle name?" "Rose. After my grandmother." I nodded. "You see the difference?" Mom started crying then, quiet tears that she tried to wipe away quickly. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I didn't realize." "You didn't realize because you didn't want to. It was easier to take me for granted, to assume I'd always be there, always be reliable, always be the one who didn't need anything. What can we do to fix this?" "I don't know if you can, Mom. Trust isn't something you can just apologize back into existence." She stayed for another hour, and I showed her around my apartment, my art studio, introduced her to Luna. I could see her struggling to reconcile this version of me, this independent, successful, creative person, with the background character I'd been in her mind. When she left, she hugged me tightly and promised things would be different. I wanted to believe her, but I'd learned not to hold my breath. The real test came 2 weeks later when Jessica's latest crisis erupted. Derek had broken up with her, apparently deciding that a woman who cheated on her husband and was living with her parents wasn't the cat she thought she was. Jessica was, predictably, devastated and demanding all of our parents' attention and resources to help her through this new trauma. I got the group text at 2 a.m. "Sarah, Jessica really needs us right now. Can you come over? She's talking about the guest room again, just temporarily while she processes this setback." I screenshot the message and sent it to my group chat with my new friends from the Artists Collective, along with the caption, "6 months later, still asking for the guest room," smiley face emoji. Then I turned off my phone and went back to sleep. The next morning brought a flurry of missed calls and increasingly frantic messages. I finally responded around noon. "Jessica is an adult who created this situation through her own choices. She needs to face the consequences and figure out her own housing situation. I will not be coming over, lending money, or providing emotional support for problems she brought on herself." The backlash was immediate and intense. I was selfish, cold-hearted, cruel. I was abandoning my family in their time of need. I was holding grudges and being vindictive. But I held firm, and something interesting happened. Without me there to serve as Jessica's safety net and our parents' scapegoat, the family dynamic began to shift. Dad started asking harder questions about Jessica's choices and her plans for independence. Mom began to see through some of Jessica's manipulation tactics without me there to absorb the manipulation meant for me. Most importantly, they started reaching out to me as a person rather than as a resource. Mom asked about my art and actually listened to my answers. Dad inquired about my business and offered to help me network through his construction contacts who might need design work. It wasn't perfect, and it wasn't immediate, but slowly, gradually, they began to see me. 6 months after my dramatic revelation dinner, I had my first solo art show at a local gallery. I sent my family an invitation, not sure if they'd come. They all showed up. Even Jessica, looking subdued and genuinely remorseful for the first time in memory. "Your work is incredible," Jessica said quietly, standing in front of my favorite piece, a mixed-media painting about invisible women becoming visible. "I never knew you were this talented." "You never asked," I replied, but without the venom that would have been there months earlier. "Sarah," she continued, "I owe you an apology. A real one. I was selfish and manipulative, and I treated you terribly. I convinced myself that you were stronger than me, that you didn't need support like I did, but really I was just taking advantage of your kindness." I studied her face, looking for signs of manipulation, but she seemed genuine. "I've been in actual therapy," she added. "Not the kind where I complain about everyone else being the problem, but the kind where I have to look at my own behavior. It's been enlightening." "I'm glad you're getting help," I said carefully. "I'm also getting my own apartment next month. I've been working 2 jobs and saving up. No more living with Mom and Dad, no more expecting everyone else to solve my problems." I nodded, impressed despite myself. The evening was a success. I sold 3 paintings, including the one Jessica had been admiring. My parents bought it and asked if they could hang it in the living room. "Are you sure you want a constant reminder of how you made one daughter invisible?" I asked. "We want a constant reminder of how incredible you are," Mom replied, "and how lucky we are that you're still willing to be part of this family." It's been a year now since my dramatic dinner revelation. The family dynamics have changed permanently, and while things aren't perfect, they're honest in a way they never were before. Jessica is thriving in her own apartment and her new job at a nonprofit. She's single and says she's focusing on becoming the kind of person who deserves a good relationship rather than trying to manipulate her way into one. My parents have both apologized multiple times and backed up their words with actions. They ask about my life, celebrate my successes, and respect my boundaries. They never again asked me to sacrifice my comfort for Jessica's convenience. And me? I'm still in my beautiful apartment with Luna, creating art that sells in galleries across the state. I'm dating a wonderful man named Kevin who knew nothing about my family drama when we met and loves me for exactly who I am. Sometimes I think about that dinner, about the moment I stood up and shattered their comfortable delusions. It was terrifying and exhilarating and necessary. Because sometimes the only way to become visible is to disappear first, and sometimes the only way to be valued is to show people what they lose when they take you for granted. My family learned that lesson the hard way, but they learned it. And now, finally, we're building something real together instead of just maintaining comfortable lies. The guest room, by the way, is still a guest room. Nobody lives there permanently anymore, and that's exactly how it should be.